Internet, so nice to see you. We are here today with another music theory talk. And, well, that entered a bit fast. Okay, just a second here. Our new guest is impatient to start. Very good. So, let me talk about phrasing. What is phrasing? Well, most people think that music theory is what you play, what chord, what notes, etc. And phrasing is how you play it. And that will be pretty much true. But at the same time, there's more to phrasing than just how you do things. Okay. So, I mean, in principle, stuff like vibrato could be described as simply grab the string and shake it. Okay. But there's a bit more to it than that. So today we go and dive a little bit more into the theory of guitar phrasing, how it works, in what element you can break it down, where do you do it, how do you do it, and all these kind of things. And we have the expert with us. We have a person who spent a lot of time digging into phrasing and breaking it into elements so that he could explain it to people and make people sound better immediately. So if all of you want to play better, keep your eyes glued on the screen. Keep your ears attached to your monitors because we are going to take a deep dive into phrasing. And today, to talk to us about phrasing, we have a very, very special guest. His name is Tom Hess. Mess, you can come in now.
I thought you had my feed off the screen, so I was just.
I thought I had your feed up too. That's the strange thing.
Yeah.
So sorry about that, but very good. Thomas, here, this side. Thomas, the expert in everything phrasing, in many other things, but in everything phrasing for sure. How are you today, Thomas?
Very good. You?
I'm fantastic, especially when I have you as a guest. I'm fantastic. Okay, so first of all, let's talk what is phrasing and why should we care about it?
All right. Well, phrasing is simply, it's not really what you play, although note choice sometimes is part of it, but it's mostly how you play whatever you play. Okay. The timing, the rhythm, the ornamentation of notes, the dynamics, the articulation, all of these various things, especially ornaments with notes, influences how you play. So, for example, if you think about someone who has really distinctive, really great phrasing, a really distinctive phrasing, I'm thinking like someone like Eddie Van Halen, for example. If you took Eddie Van Halen, took the notes out, and inserted other notes in, takes Van Halen licks, remove the notes or change the notes, scramble them around, for the most part, when he would play, it would still sound like Van Halen. And that just goes to show you it's because of how he plays the notes, how he ornaments notes, how he accents notes. That's really a bigger aspect than simply what the notes are. And why this is important is that a lot of times when students or just guitar players generally try to learn songs or licks or solos by someone else, they're really focused on either what the notes are. Let's make sure we get the notes right. What are the notes of the lick and so on? Or maybe on the technical aspect, how is it a downstroke or an upstroke? Is he doing a hem-on or a pull-off here? They get really focused in on that stuff, but they sometimes tend to miss the fact that, well, maybe Van Halen was using rubato on that lick. Maybe the articulation on some of the accented notes was different, or some of the notes were ornamented in a different way than the other notes. And sometimes people miss that. It's sort of easy to miss, especially if you're looking at tablature and you can't always notate specifically all the little ways in which how the notes are played are happening. Some things you can notate, but not everything. You really have to hear it, and you have to pay attention very closely to all that stuff to try to learn the style, learn the phrasing, and then copy it if you want to copy it. And so that you can either then use those phrasing elements or change them or modify them or whatever. So it's basically how you play and also how you ornament notes. Okay. If you think about, if you've got a lick and the lick has 8 notes in it or 12 notes in it or whatever, Not all of those notes are going to be ornamented, probably. They're probably not all going to have a slide on it, or you're not going to approach it from a string bend or have vibrato or whatever. But some of those notes are, and it's not just what the ornaments are, but how you ornament, how you apply vibrato, how you apply a slide. Those things are, we'll get into some of that a little bit later. But right now I'm just going to talk about ornaments as a principle here. All right. And then the next thing is how you set notes up to be accented or to be ornamented. So if you have a bunch of notes and you want one note to stand out more than the other, what are your options? Well, you could play that note louder, right? Stronger articulation, louder dynamics. You might approach that note from a bend or from a slide. You might make sure to pick the note instead of doing legato. You might set up the note by playing something else before it. You might play an appoggiatura. An appoggiatura is where you leap up. You're on a lower note, you leap up, and then you come down by step. The appoggiatura may be the note that's being accented, or the resolution of the appoggiatura might be. You might rearticulate a rearticulated note. You might play a bend, rearticulate the bend. You might hit a chord tone before dissonance. So, for example, if we have let's say we have an A minor chord. Okay, if that's our chord, A minor or A minor 7 here. And if we want to play this note, okay, that note is not in the chord, right? That's a B note. That would be the 9th. But there is no 9th in this chord. Okay. So in the hands of someone who maybe is not so experienced, if they're going around improvising and they land on this note, it might sound, I don't know, a little amateurish. Maybe it sounds like, oh, maybe they missed the note. But in the hand of a more experienced player, they might do something before they play that note and as they play that note to set it up so that when you hear it, it doesn't sound like you played the wrong note, or you didn't really know what you were doing, or the note is kind of just random. So, for example, so there's our 9th, okay, not in the chord. But now this note doesn't sound out of place. I mean, you may or may not like that note. You may or may not like the way I'm playing the note. But regardless of whether you like it or not, it doesn't sound out of place. It sounds now intentional. There's feeling to it. So I'm doing something before the note is playing. I'm setting it up by playing a chord tone first. I'm playing a note that's in the chord. In fact, actually, I'm playing 2 in this case. This one, that's A. There's C. That's another note in the chord. Okay, so there's really 3 things that I'm doing to make that 9th sound cool, or at least I think it sounds cool. The first thing is I'm setting up the note to be successful before we get it. How do we do that? I'm playing a chord tone, a note that's in the chord. In this case, I'm actually playing 2 chord tones, but I could just play 1 and that will be fine. All right, so that it's clear to the listener that this note is the B note is not random. There's the chord tone, and there's the 9th, the non-chord tone, the dissonant note. All right, so I'm setting up the note so that the listener is going to perceive it as it's intentional and it belongs here. And it's not just random. The second thing that I did was I did a slide into it. I actually did a descending slide. I didn't just do that. You could do that, but when you add a phrasing element such as a bend or a slide or vibrato or something like that, it makes the note sound A, more intentional, and B, it just has more life to it. Okay, so then the third thing is I'm ornamenting the note with vibrato at the end. But if you noticed, I did not ornament the chord tones. That was on purpose. I didn't do this. We could do that. If you like that sound, I guess you could. But since all the notes now have the same ornament, they all have vibrato, there's really no separation in terms of the expressiveness of each note. It's the same ornament for all. Doesn't sound that cool, at least not to me. Now, if we do the opposite, no ornamentation at all, that also sounds not so nice to me, not very expressive. So we're going to be using some expression somewhere, and now we have to decide how or where or which notes do we want to ornament. Do we ornament all of them? Well, you could, but I'm not usually going to do that. It's my personal preference. You can do whatever you want. We could ornament none of them. That might sound kind of lame. Or we can ornament one or two of them. And then we have to decide, okay, if we're going to do that, so we have a balance there, which note are we going to ornament? Should we do the first one? You could, if you wanted to. You could, I mean, that doesn't sound horrible, but it's not my preference. It's not horribly bad. It's just kind of okay. We could ornament the second note, which is also a chord tone. You could do that. I changed the rhythm there a little bit to get the vibrato in. Or we could ornament the last note. Now, for me, that last one sounds the best. And again, we don't have to agree. If you have a different opinion, no problem at all. You can do whatever you want. But what's important is that you are aware of these various choices and you try them out. Okay, so setting up the note will help make a note you want to accent or note that becomes, it makes a note which is otherwise maybe not so important become important. And you express that with intention. It makes it very clear that this note, it's not a mistake. It's not just an afterthought. It wasn't random. It's not like you just did, like you forgot to finish the scale. Okay. So, and the next thing is using motives here.
Let's stay a moment here because you said a number of interesting things, and then you also changed what note you were applying the phrasing to. So I want to stress a couple of things. First, you are literally playing ABC, okay, ACB. But I mean, it's the simplest thing you can play, okay? It's 3 notes in the scale, okay? So it doesn't have to be complicated. We don't have to go and study the Superlocrian scale to do that, okay? Or other stuff. It's ABC. Second, using the same phrasing but on different note change completely the meaning of the phrase, the feeling, the style, etc. So if you guys are watching us, many of you have a goal of sounding like somebody else or sounding in a specific style. So one thing you could do would be to listen, now that you have this idea of listening where the phrasing elements are played, go and listen to your favorite players and hear if your favorite player puts the phrasing at the beginning of the phrase, in the middle of the phrase, at the end of the phrase, or the beginning and the end and not the middle, or any combination, and what kind of phrasing. So maybe this person, your favorite player, will use slides at the beginning of the phrase and vibrato at the end, or stuff like that. If you listen, you will spot those patterns. And once you listen to more than one person you like, you will spot the pattern you like. Once you spot the pattern, you can reproduce it, okay? Like I say to most people, sounding like any guitar player out there is really not so hard if you listen to what they're doing and spot those patterns. And we'll do more in a minute about all that, but just wanted to make sure you guys keep this in mind, okay? Because the 3 different players can play the same notes and sound completely different, and I must just showed you how. Good. What were you saying before I interrupted you?
Yeah, great stuff. And we don't have the time to sit there and go deeper into what you just talked about, Dr. Zelio, but we could definitely take what you just said, and we could spend a couple of hours going really deep into that. But since there's other things we want to talk about today, and we don't have hours and hours, we'll just move on. So the next thing I was going to talk about here regarding the phrasing is we talked about ornaments, okay, vibrato, slides, bends, and whatever. We talked a little bit about setting up notes, especially non-chord tones, notes that are not currently in the chord that you're playing, so that they sound good and intentional, okay? And then the next thing is you can set up a series of notes through motives. So there are two basic kinds of motives. There are rhythmic motives where you have the same short little rhythmic idea, might be 3 or 4 notes long. That's it. And then that rhythm, that little rhythmic motive, might then work its way through a series of phrases. You might build phrase upon phrase upon phrase using rhythmic motives. Another type of motive, perhaps a little bit more common, are melodic motives. So, for example, if you have, let's say, 2 notes, and we'll play 2 notes that are a sixth apart, okay? A sixth apart. So if I play this, okay, the first note I play was C. Then I'm going up a sixth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up a sixth to A. Now, that A note, at least to me, really sings. And it sings for 3 reasons. The first reason why it sings is that I didn't give up on the note. Okay, when I play the A note, I'm holding it. I'm not giving up. I'm not going to another note. I'm not hitting the note again and again and again to keep it alive. Okay, I'm not giving up on the note. So that helps make any note sing. Just don't give up on it. Okay. The second thing is I'm doing vibrato, of course, on the note, which helps it sound more lyrical. And I'm doing something special with the vibrato, which we're going to talk about later. I'm not going to reveal it now, but we will in maybe 20 or 30 minutes. We'll get into what I just did, why it works the way it does. But the third thing, the important thing for what we're talking about right now, the motive, is that the A note was set up to sing by the note before. Okay, so if I just played the A note by itself, that's kind of cool, but it's just a note. Okay, it's just a note with some nice vibrato on it. But that's all it is. But when we play a note a sixth lower in the key, in the scale, now the feeling of this A note is different. Let me try that again. So now I'm just bending up to the A. Now, it's not a motive yet. I mean, it could be the start of a motive. It's not a sequence yet. But what if we did this? That high note, that last note, the B note, your ear, whether you realize it or not, your ear was already waiting for the note before it occurred. This is really important, okay? I established a motive, the sixth, then I started to sequence it. Even before I played the B, part of your ear, even if it's only in your subconscious, expected to hear that note. What do you think I'm going to play next? Right? You can predict it now. What's coming next? Okay. Those little motives can be used to set up a sequence. So I was just playing a sequence of 6. So all those high notes really sing because they're being launched from the note below. The sixth going up or you have playing a note, you're going up a sixth. That you can think of the low note as like a launch pad, and the rocket is the note above. It's a sixth higher. Now you can get that with other intervals too, but the sixth is really powerful as a setup, as a launch pad for a higher note. So you can play any phrase you want. Listen how strong the A note sounds. Not because the A note, this is the A note here, not because it's the highest note, but because it was launched from. So that's something that is really strong to use. You can do that with thirds. You can do it really with anything. But if you had to pick one interval, one strong, very strong melodic motive, melodic interval that's going to sound most like a singer, it's going to be the sixth. So sometimes people ask, I teach a lot of rock students, a lot of metal guys and other blues students too, but the metal guys students often ask, how do I make my fast licks and stuff sound more melodic? Because they're just playing a bunch of licks and fast notes and so on. Well, one of the things you can do is try to copy what singers do. And if you hear a singer sing a sixth, that high note usually is going to be very, very, very strong. If you pay attention to it, listen to great singers, you'll hear that often. So anyway, that's just an example of a motive which you can use in a sequence, or you can just use at the beginning or the end of phrases to set up notes that then you're going to ornament in special ways. You're going to bend up to them or do vibrato or slides or whatever you're going to do.
Fantastic. So could you play the very same lick with zero vibrato? I'm going to make a point in a moment, but could you play the very same lick with zero vibrato?
Are you talking about just the interval?
Yeah, the sixth, like you were playing, but you were playing them with the vibrato on the top note.
Yes.
So can you play it again without the vibrato? I want people to hear the difference.
Yes. Want me to sequence it?
Yes, please. Good. Now play it again with the vibrato. It does make a difference, quite a big difference, especially toward the end of the note, for the emotion that pours out toward the end of the note. So I know you put a lot of importance on vibrato.
Yes.
And I also know, because you taught me that, okay, you teach the vibrato and you start teaching the vibrato, dividing it in different elements of the speed of the vibrato, the width of the vibrato, the contour of the vibrato. I know a lot of people haven't the faintest idea about all that. And I know, so nobody will ask you this question because they don't know you do that. But I think a lot of people that are now listening to us will benefit if you could break down the vibrato in those elements. So could you do that?
Sure. Well, there's a bunch of elements, but we'll talk about the three that you just mentioned. So the first one is the width. Okay, how wide the width of the vibrato is. That means how much are you bending the string and then releasing back down and bending back. So the peaks and the valleys of the vibrato, you can do it very shallow, okay, very narrow, or it can be very wide. Okay, so someone like B.B. King, his vibrato was very fast, which we'll talk about speed separately, and pretty narrow. Okay, someone like Zakk Wylde, it's not as fast as B.B. King's vibrato. It's pretty quick, but it's not as fast as B.B. King's. But it's very, very wide. Okay, Yngwie is usually on the slower side, slower than Zakk Wylde most of the time. But it's not usually as wide as Zakk Wylde, but it's pretty thick most of the time. Okay, Eric Clapton tends to have narrower vibrato, slower and typically narrower. But the point is, the wider that you make the vibrato, the more dramatic it's going to be. Okay. just showing you in slow motion. Wider, more drama. Now, that doesn't mean that more drama is always better all the time. Wider is not always better. Certainly, it's better if you're playing anything aggressive. Wider is generally better. Okay, if you're playing anything energetic, wider is generally better. But if you're playing, let's say, a ballad, and it's not, or a more subdued tune, then wide vibrato might be a little obnoxious. It might be a little bit too much for the particular song or style or feel. So it's not that wide vibrato is better than narrow, or narrow is better than wide. It's that you want to have the ability to do very wide vibrato, so that if and when you want to play that way, you have the skill and you can do it comfortably. You can do it just no problem. It's not hard at all. Okay. And then in real life, you can choose. Do I want to be really aggressive and sound like Zakk Wylde? Or do I want to sound like Eric Clapton or even B.B. King and get this narrow, or anywhere in between? So what makes good phrasing is sort of knowing. Good phrasing is, in terms of the width of the vibrato, is two parts. First, having the skill set, the capacity to do wide or narrow, having the ability. And then second is having the discretion of knowing or deciding what's the best width for this moment in the solo or in the song or in the lick. So that's a bit subjective, but tradition would tell you what most people respond well to.
When you're talking about narrow or wide, what do you mean in terms of bending? It's a half step, a full step, less than a half step?
Yeah, I mean, really narrow would be, less than a half step. Pretty narrow. Okay. Wide could be whole step, could be a step and a half. It could be as wide as you can make it. So, but narrow is not, it's not necessarily a half step. And that's the thing, that the width does not need to be in tune. Okay. So if you're playing, we got an A minor 7 chord. Okay. And you're going to play the B note. You don't have to bend the B note up to sound like C because the C note is in the chord. You can do that, half step vibrato. So this vibrato is in tune. It's going from B to C, and it's in tune. But you don't have to do it in tune. You could do it less, okay? That's definitely less than a half step. So the peak, okay, the peaks and the values, the peak is not in tune with the chord or with the key, okay? And that's okay, because the ear isn't hearing the top as being the part that's in tune. It's hearing the bottom. Your ear perceives the bottom, the valley, as what the note is in this particular case, okay? You could also do a full step bend. So from B to C sharp. Even though the C sharp is not in the key, it might sound a bit aggressive for a nice chord like this. But if you were playing a more aggressive tune, the top of the vibrato does not need to be in key. You can be in pitch, doesn't have to be. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about here is the speed. And the speed and the width kind of go together, but they don't have to. You can do slow and wide. You can do slow and narrow. You can do fast and wide. You can do fast and narrow. So fast and narrow would be like B.B. King. That's like the ultimate, really fast and really shallow. Sounds like a mosquito. Okay, if you like that sound, great. If you don't like that sound, and many people don't, which is why it hasn't been copied very often, then you might not want to do fast and narrow. This is just personal preference, okay? Zakk Wylde tends to do fast and wide, where Yngwie would do something maybe not quite as wide and usually not quite as fast, but sometimes it is. But it's usually a half step or more. So, but the speed makes a big difference. Versus. What's best? We don't know what's best yet because we don't have a context. There's no song here. I'm not playing over any chords or rhythm. So depending upon what you're playing over, slow might be better, fast might be better, medium might be better. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about the speed and maybe separately a little later on. But right now, just you want to have the ability to do narrow fast and narrow slow, wide fast and wide slow, and of course narrow and fast medium. Okay, having the ability. So once you have the here's the point. Here's what I try and tell my students. Don't choose your favorite vibrato and think, oh, I like wide and fast, or I like slow and narrow, and then just practice that. That would be a big mistake because that's only going to be appropriate for the song or the solo sometimes. Other times, another approach is going to be better. So you want to have the skills on both sides and then choose based on whatever the context is. The third point here is contour. So you can make the vibrato pretty smooth. So if you drew it out on a paper, okay, it's nice and smooth, or it can be really angular, okay, where the motions are more harsh. I'll exaggerate it here so you wouldn't really find this in music very often, but you could hear it. So that sounds more like a bunch of string bends and releases than it does vibrato, but technically it is vibrato. Because I'm pausing before I bend, then I bend and I pause at the top. So it looks more like this. Okay, that's more angular. Most vibrato is more wavy, where it's a continuous, it's smoother. Okay, it's not angular, but you could do it wavy or angular in terms of the contour.
And let me add a thing here. Is also how fast you go up and how fast you go down. That's also still part of contour. I found that the players I like more personally, it's completely my opinion, they go up as fast as they come down. But most people, when they're learning vibrato, they go up slowly and they come down fast. So they do. But the player I prefer, and again, completely subjective, tend to have the same speed going up and going down. Okay? People can even exaggerate, go up fast and go down slow. Okay? All these will be part of contour. And again, I'm exaggerating the three cases, a bit subtler than that, but those are things to think about when you study this, because they influence the sound and they influence the emotion of the sound, the feeling that the sound give you. So just having those three elements is already a big step in taking control of your vibrato. I want to address one thing here, because other people tell you, yeah, you have the vibrato you have, it's just instinct, it's just talent, whatever. And I say, nope. No, it's like everything else you learn, like everything else you listen to what you like, and you make it more like the way you like. Okay, so everything we said so far, it's theory, but it's also exercises. Okay, it's stuff. You can sit down and think, okay, I like Eric Clapton. Let me hear how fast is his vibrato, how wide is his vibrato, how smooth is his vibrato. And you can sit down and copy each element and get a pretty similar vibrato. And honestly, it doesn't even take that much. Okay, if you sit down in a few days of practice, you can nail it. That or any other vibrato. The hardest are usually the wide one, because you need more physical strength. But my point here is, with what Tom Hess just told you, you can already sound like your guitar heroes. And if you imitate the vibrato, you are already, I'm not saying 90%, but more than halfway through, sounding like that person, if that's what you want. So those are the three elements, or the three basic elements. Is there more to vibrato apart those three?
Yeah, there's really four more elements in the theory of vibrato. So the next one, which relates to speed, but is not the same as speed, is tempo. Okay. So you can have vibrato, the pulses of the vibrato be either a division of a beat, or you can do it in free time. Okay. What's the difference? The difference is that if you're doing vibrato just randomly, you're just using a certain speed that either feels comfortable to you or you just kind of like that speed. And there may not be anything wrong with that. It's called free time. Okay. But the song may be at a certain tempo that's faster or slower than the vibrato speed you're using. If you want the vibrato to sound more locked in with the music, then it would be useful if the vibrato, the pulses matched some division of the beat. That either means you're doing the vibrato pulses in quarter notes, that would be really slow, eighth notes, eighth note triplets, maybe 16th notes, or some other division of the beat, so that it sounds as it's part of the song. It doesn't sound like out of place. Now you can do free time vibrato. People do it all the time. There's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't sound as tight as doing it, in a tempo. Okay. It's just going to sound a little bit more like it belongs to the tune. One other little thing is that if you use the free time vibrato and you're recording and you try to harmonize that, or you're playing with another player, if you're doing free time and the other track you already recorded is free time, good luck trying to match that up. You're playing with another guitar player or a singer, and you're trying to match or harmonize vibrato. If you're both doing free time, you're not going to be able to really match that up. But if you're doing it as an eighth note or an eighth note triplet or something like that, double tracking it or harmonizing it is going to be much, much, much easier. So tempo is really important there.
On these, I just want to make people notice that, because you glossed over a little tiny detail, and I think people will. If you are recording two guitar parts harmonized, like Iron Maiden, let's say, you have to match the vibrato. The two guitar players, or the two tracks, if it's always you recording, cannot have random vibrators. The two vibrators to go up and down at the same time. Try the difference. It's pretty evident, and you notice that all the bands are doing that because it sounds so much better. That's a little detail that I've seen only professionals do and amateurs don't. Okay. Yeah. But if you do it, and honestly, it's not that hard. You just need to remember when you went up and when you went down, and do it at the same speed when you record the second track. Okay. It requires a bit of, just need to pay attention and do it. Okay. But it sounds so much better. Okay. Honestly, even the tone of the guitar sound better, because since the vibrato are synchronized, you don't get all the nasty, strange harmonics that happen when the vibrato go out of tune, which everything feels out of tune and everything sound harsh. So the perception is that the tone of the guitar is better, even if the tone is exactly the same, because you are more in tune with what you're doing. So yeah, it's a little detail, but keep that in mind. Okay, if you ever record harmonized guitar parts.
Yeah, exactly. And if you listen to Yngwie Malmsteen, he often has harmony parts or double track parts in the solos, and those vibratos are absolute perfection. I'm not saying that his style is perfect. I mean, you may think so or not. That's not the point. I mean that the way that those vibratos move together, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect every single time. If you listen to great singers or harmonized singers, the same. And when it's not that way, it's a mess. It just sounds like a bunch of amateurs, I don't know, singing in the church choir or something like that. But great singers who harmonize or double track or harmonize, it's awesome. And you can hear all those voices coming up and down together, and it's really tight and it's very dramatic, and it's just great. It sounds awesome. So that's a big tell when you listen to players. If they're not in tempo, maybe it's because they're choosing to do it in free time in this particular case. But when you hear that a lot, it kind of sounds like amateur hour. So getting the vibrato in tempo, some division of the beat, will immediately set you above what most other, let's say, amateur players would do. And it's not that hard. As Tommaso said, it's not that hard to do. It just takes a little bit of paying attention, a little bit of practice. It's not difficult. You play other things in time. Why wouldn't you be able to play vibrato in time? You certainly can. So the next element here for sort of the theory of vibrato here is when to play the vibrato. And I don't mean on which note to do the vibrato. I mean when during the life cycle of a note. So if you play a note here and it's going to sustain all the way to here, if you apply the vibrato immediately, that's called instant vibrato, meaning you play the note and you are instantly applying the vibrato throughout the course of the note. Okay. Nothing is wrong with that. I'm just telling you what it's called. Okay. Another way to use vibrato is to delay it. Okay. So you play a note, you let it ring out, no vibrato at all. And then at some point, maybe an eighth note later, maybe a beat later, maybe a half note later, then you apply the vibrato. So you'll hear really good singers, pop singers in particular, do this a lot. They'll play a note, often a high note. Okay, they'll hold it out, no vibrato, and then the vibrato comes in a beat later or so on. So I was doing that earlier, and I said I would talk about that, and now it's time to talk about that. So when I did this, that is delayed vibrato. No vibrato, now vibrato. Okay, versus instant vibrato. The instant vibrato is not bad, but it's different. Instant, delayed. Okay, so the delayed vibrato tends to be more dramatic. Why would it be more dramatic? Well, it's not that the timing of the vibrato is really more dramatic. It's how the listener perceives what's happening that's more dramatic. See, if we did vibrato on every note, okay, that's a little goofy, right? I don't think that sounds all that great. But the point is the listener gets immune to the effect, immune to the point of being maybe even annoyed, okay? Here, they're just, once you play the note and there's no vibrato, no one's expecting that you're going to add vibrato afterwards. They just expect this note to last until it dies or until you play something else. When you delay the vibrato, it forces the listener to pay attention. If they weren't paying attention before, they are now. There's no way around it. You cannot ignore a delayed vibrato note. Okay. It's really powerful because it changes the perception of the listener. It's not that the vibrato is any different than instant, but because you delay it, it forces the attention of the listener, and that's what makes it powerful. All right, so the sixth element here for vibrato is variance, okay? So strictly consistent, meaning you do the vibrato the same way throughout the course of the note, or you vary the note throughout the lifetime of the note. So again, we're just talking about one note here, okay? So again, here's our note. There's the start of the note. It's going to last all the way to here, let's say. So we've already talked about instant vibrato versus delayed vibrato. And now we're talking about variance of vibrato. So regardless of when you start the vibrato, it's going to either be the same throughout, the same speed, the same depth, okay, the same timing all the way throughout, whether it's instant vibrato or delayed vibrato. Or you can speed up and get wider, or speed up and get narrower, or slow down and get wider, or slow down and get narrower. Okay, you can vary the speed or the width of the vibrato through the note. Now, this is easier to do for a singer than it is for a guitar player because the singers can generally hold out notes longer than we can. Our note is going to die at some point most of the time. Okay. So did you hear what just happened there? I played the note slower and narrower. And then it got wider and faster. And when that happened, what you heard was the note start screaming. So think of the note as like a voice. It sounds like it's screaming there at the end, which is ironic because the note is actually getting quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter. Right? The note is decaying, but the vibrato is trying to keep that note alive. The wider and faster you go, the more it keeps the note alive. Okay, so it's a variance. In this case, I'm getting more aggressive as the note goes on. We could do the opposite. So there was the opposite. It was more aggressive in the beginning, and it got narrower and slower towards the end. I don't like that one as much as the first one, where you increase the intensity, but you could do it either way depending on the context. So, and you hear good singers vary vibrato a lot. The last element here, the seventh one for vibrato.
Let me just mention, yes, good singer vary the vibrato a lot. I want you guys to pay attention on how much care singers put on a single note, how little care most guitar players put on a single note. But if we put that care into a single note, you see how it sounds. Okay? And I know a lot of people are out there searching for the perfect guitar, the perfect amp, the perfect pedal, because they want that sound. And that sound does not come from the guitar, the pedal, an amp, an effect, or anything. It comes from your fingers. I'm not saying all tone come from your fingers by all means, but that sound, that emotion come from your finger and controlling the vibrato. Okay? We are doing a deep dive into vibrato. We could have done a deep dive into anything, but vibrato is really, really important. It's kind of your signature, okay? So, and the thing that changes everything is the listening, okay? So you can listen to a singer and hear now all those elements. You've heard those elements here. You can go and listen to a singer, to a guitar player, etc., and hear if they're doing that and how they're doing that, okay? And just putting it there before Tomas goes on the next element, which is incredibly important too. Go for it.
Yeah, and just to add something, if you're thinking, what singer should I listen to? Who should I listen to? Well, there's going to be a lot of great singers that you can listen to, but I'll give you one, and I'll give you a specific song to listen to if you want to hear incredible vibrato executed in really incredible ways. If you listen to Whitney Houston and the song I Will Always Love You, that was actually a Dolly Parton tune that she covered. You guys may remember this. Okay, it's a pop song. Okay, maybe you don't like that style. It doesn't matter if you like the style. All that matters is that you take a listen to it. Just pay attention to how vibrato is used, when it's used, the variance, the tempo, the speed. If it's delayed, it's often delayed in that song. Okay, the contour of it, you will hear. There's a lot to learn just by listening to that. So, okay, the last element here for vibrato is positioning. Okay, the position of the vibrato. Okay, so when you play a note on the guitar, let's say this note, the position of the vibrato can't change. It can only go higher. So let me draw you a picture, okay? Here's our note. This is the start of a note, okay? Right there. Now, when you do vibrato, because we're playing a stringed instrument with frets, our vibrato cannot go below this note. It can only go above the note. We don't have any other choice. On a fretted instrument, where we're not bending the string, we're not using a whammy bar, we're just playing a note and doing vibrato. The position of the vibrato is only at 0. 0 represents what the note would sound like if you did not do vibrato. And then the top of the peaks here. So it's above. The vibrato is up. Okay. Now, most, not all, most singers do exactly the opposite. They would flip this upside down and it would look like this. Okay. the note they're hitting is here, and they usually go lower. So if this note is C, they're usually going lower rather than higher. This is very common, especially on high notes. Why would that be? Is it because all the singers have gotten together and they had the annual singers meeting in Vienna somewhere, and they all decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do our vibrato lower. No, that didn't happen. I guarantee you that never happened. But it's just a practical thing. It's the higher you go, the harder it is on the throat, the harder it is on the voice. So we're singing a really high note. Do you think it's easy to go even higher and hold that and go like this? No, it's hard. Okay. But if you go lower, the voice actually gets a little break. Okay. So on high notes in particular, the vibrato is almost always lower. Okay. Now on a guitar, fretted instrument, without bending a string, we can't do that unless you have a vibrato bar and you use a vibrato bar and you go down. Then you could mimic what singers do. They go below the note. Okay. Now, there is a way for you to also go below the note. If you wanted to position your vibrato below, then you would, instead of playing the B note, where now you can only go up, you'd have to bend from below. I'll play A sharp here. And I quickly bent up to B. Okay, you can do a ghost bend. Now from here, you can go down. So now the vibrato is lower than the note that we're hitting, okay, the B note in this case. Okay, it's harder to do that than it is just to hit the B note and go up. So for us, it's easier to go up. For singers, it's easier for them to go down unless it's a really low note on the bottom of their range. Then it would be easier for them to go up. But we can also do one other thing. When you bend a pitch, okay, I'm bending A to sound like B. Okay, you can go below the note. Okay, this is called bent note vibrato. You bend the note, then you do vibrato. You can go above the note. Okay, or you can swirl around the note, which is what I do. Okay, so you bend up. Okay, and this is the note. Let's say you bend A to sound like B. You can go above the note and come back, above and come back. You can go below and come back, below and come back. I do this. I go above and below. Now, what's important when you here's the bent pitch right in the center. When you do this, it's very important, and I'll play this for you in a minute. It's very important that the distance between the peaks and these valleys are exactly the same. If they're not the same, the whole thing will sound bad and out of tune, okay? Because the listener's ear is going to find the midpoint. So if these aren't the same, the midpoint that they're perceiving is going to be out of tune in their head. And if it's out of tune in their head, it's just going to sound like you're out of tune, okay? So here's an example of that. This is swirling around. So it sounds pretty dramatic when you swirl around the note. So I'm going above and below that pitch. It's more dramatic that way, but it requires more control to get the peaks consistent and the valleys consistent and consistent by the same amount relative to the center. But positioning is that those are the three choices you have. You can go above the note, below the note, or you can swirl around the note. Obviously, on a guitar, you have to bend the string to go below or to swirl around.
Fantastic. That's not an easy thing to do, but it does sound good.
Takes practice.
Okay. Well, we did a pretty deep dive into vibrato. Okay. That's just to give you guys the idea how in detail we can go on those things. And all those things that we said are not small things. I mean, all of those influence the sound, all of those make a difference in your playing. So anybody who's watching right now, I recommend once we finish here, go back at the beginning, listen to the whole thing, okay, and try to do this on your guitar. The first time is not going to be easy, telling you, but even a little bit of effort in the right direction will make a big difference in sound, okay? And honestly, I don't think you're going to find anywhere else such a deep dive and breakdown of the elements of vibrato. No, you can do all these with all the other phrasing elements. But now that you've seen it with vibrato, I think you can do and generalize on your own too. I mean, we can always do another one specifically on slide, specifically on hammer-on, specifically. You're going to do a lot of live streams on this, Tom Hess. but okay, but you guys now have an idea on how the whole thing works. More than that, even if you don't practice, even just now knowing about all this thing, knowing about the width and the speed and the contour and the tempo and instant and delayed and the variance of you can change and modulate those things in time. If you vibrato above or below a note or around the note, all this kind of thing. Now, knowing all these, you are going to listen to your guitar heroes and you're going to understand what they're doing. You're going to listen to singers and going to understand what they're doing, and you're going to identify what you like. That's the most important thing. And you're going to start hearing your vibrato and how your vibrato, as you're doing it right now, is different than the vibrato you like, which at the beginning could be painful, honestly, because and nobody wants to be remembered how distant we are from our ideal. But if you know what's the difference, you can fix it. Okay, you can start going in the right direction. Okay, that's why I say now that you have this idea, rewatch everything from the beginning. Okay, this live stream is going to be available in a few minutes to be rewatched from the beginning. So rewatch this thing from the beginning. Pay attention to those things. Go and listen to your favorite music and start thinking about it. Okay. And when you're rich and famous, remember who told you all that. Okay. But because those things make the difference. Even you may not be able to play any faster or play any more complex things, but if you take even just your vibrato under control, now you sound good. Okay. It's kind of funny you learn all this from a couple of shredders here. Okay, because I mean, stereotypically, we are the soulless shredder. Now, the people who play fast and with no emotion and stuff. Apparently, we are the one who care the most about this. So, okay, so makes sense. So you go and listen to all these. Tom Hess, I know you have something for us, something that you want to give us. So let me give you some space and put this on the.
Yes. This is called Fretboard Freedom, Blueprint to Discover a Nearly Effortless Way to Visualize Scales on the Guitar. This is free, okay? I'm not selling anything here. There's nothing to buy. This is free, okay? So you guys can click on the link, all right, or type it out and download it right now. Basically, what this is going to do is it's going to help you to visualize the scales on the guitar. Now, you might be thinking, well, I already know my scales. I don't need to visualize anything. I know where the minor scale is. I know where the Lydian scale. I already know that stuff. Okay, and you might. And if you do, that's great. Well, let me ask you, if you are on the G string of the Lydian scale and you wanted to go up 4 positions, would you be able to do that without thinking and smoothly get there and know exactly where you are? Or would you have to think about that for a moment? Would you have to say, okay, wait a minute, let's see, Lydian, mixer Lydian, low creed, yeah, I know where it is. Okay, if you have to think about it, you wouldn't be able to really use it in real time. Let's say if you were improvising or playing with one of your friends, or you just wanted to have some fun, when you have to think about that stuff to kind of figure it out and find it, that takes a lot of the fun away, because now you got to stop, you got to pause, you got to kind of figure out where things are, and what you miss is the fluidity to be able to just fluently go from here to here, wherever you are on the guitar, okay, and I know exactly where I'm at. I know exactly where to go. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to pause or hesitate. I can just get there. So this ebook will help you to do that. And again, it's totally free. Just download it and you can start working with this today.
And of course, you'll find the link to these in the description of the video. So you don't have to type it. You can just click on it and go there. And then I have one thing for you guys too. I have these, which is 18 tips to make your pentatonic solo sound professional. Again, it's completely free, no string attached, not selling anything right here. What is that? Well, we learned about phrasing, and some of you know about scales. The question is, how do we put the stuff together? Okay, so I identified 18 patterns, if you want, 18 things that great guitar players do, okay? Specific moves that they have, like play this note, do this phrasing element, do this other thing. And I identified 18 of them, and I'm explaining them to you. You could go learn only one of them, make it part of your playing, and then start improving on that, because any one of those tips can be customized, can be to your style, can be adapted to any song, etc., etc. You can learn all of them. You can learn only one. It will change the way you think about playing. Okay, it's not just the scale, it's not just the phrasing. It's kind of the integration of the two. Okay, completely free. Have a look at that. If you like the sound of the classic guitar heroes, okay, from Clapton, okay, Jeff Beck, Dave Gilmour, etc., you're gonna find pretty much most of the trick inside here. If you like more modern guitar, you still get these, learn those, and then you're gonna see that with a couple of modifications, you're gonna apply this to any other scale or any other situation and make it sound more modern. But just get it. Get both our things, okay? So get these and get these, okay? They are both free, and they're gonna help you a lot, okay? And then if you need more help, if you have questions, write us. Okay, we're not unapproachable. You just send us an email, and let's see what we can do for you. Tom Hess, thank you for coming here today.
Thank you.
That was very detailed. That was very to the point, and also very practical. Okay, so thank you for doing that.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tommaso.
Okay, everybody watching us, thank you for coming. We hope you got something from here. We hope you got a lot from here. And again, recommend to watch this from the beginning. Thank you for coming, and until next time, enjoy.